psychoanalysts have probed him. Wise men have pondered him. Colonists have kidded him. Admirers have saluted him. The League of Nations gave him a special medal as a symbol of international goodwill. Hitler was infuriated by him and thunderingly forbade his people to wear the then popular Mickey Mouse lapel in place of the swastika. But all we ever intended for him was that he should make people everywhere chuckle with him and at him. That was written by Walt Disney in 1948. And 73 years later, it's even more true. Mickey may have had an original intent, but has certainly been adapted and molded to his contemporary time periods. His look has gone from a stringy, gritty, rat-like creature to a boyish round face, inviting, welcoming, and a representative of the company. The look of Mickey has all been documented ad nauseum. But in the 90s, it was a weird time for Mickey, and there's one look that's rarely mentioned. Mickey Mouse from hell. Well, not really so much from hell as from the minds at Disney and director Chris Bailey. And now, Chris Bailey with the story of Disney's Runaway Brain.
I landed a Disney feature a couple years out of CalArts. I found myself in development and was given the assignment of coming up with some Mickey shorts. And I worked with a friend of mine, Tim Hauser, who was a writer. He was an animator as well at CalArts, but he'd moved on to the writing side. And I pretty much sat in a room and I would just do funny drawings or situations or things I thought were funny of Mickey Mouse. And there was one that had sort of a Calvin and Hobbes-ish monster pose on Mickey. I remember being inspired by sort of Calvin acting out Godzilla. And I remember Tim coming in saying, "This is funny." And because it looked like a possessed Mickey Mouse. And so he sort of built the concept around that. And our inspiration for the tone was really going back to the original Mad Scientist cartoon, the black and white Mickey, where Mickey, I can't remember the exact premise, but Pluto had been kidnapped by a mad scientist. And Pluto and Mickey had to fight his way through this haunted house, kind of like Dirk the Daring in Dragon's Lair, to rescue his buddy.
I can grab the chicken's gizzard on the wishbone of a pup.
And the mad scientist was really demented. He wanted to cut Pluto in half and graft him onto a bird. It was just wonderfully cartoony and sadistic. So I was thinking, well, what could I do today that would sort of be that sort of dark, fun, cartoon Halloween tone? And Tim and I, created this cartoon.
And playing along as a special added attraction comes an all-new cartoon adventure.
I hate adventure!
Perfect! It's the shocking return of Mickey Mouse.
Ow! Help! Stop! It's me, Mickey!
Runaway Brain, rated G. Playing only with Disney's A Kid in King Arthur's Court, rated PG. Starts August 11th.
In those early cartoons, something that was very important to me is that, especially the black and white ones, is that Mickey was a kid. Mickey was 18 years old, 20. I figured just a couple years out of high school. And he was dating girls. Bosses were like authority figures, like teachers or parents, people to be thwarted. And he just liked to have fun. And he wouldn't, take any crap from anybody. Then later, when the cartoon, as the animators got older, Mickey's, conflicts became less about dealing with the landlord or the boss or, whatever. And it became, gosh, there's like, a little whirlwind that wants to knock over my bucket of leaves, and oh, darn those squirrels, that keep eating the tomatoes I'm raising in the backyard. And it was incredibly boring to me as a kid, or even as a young man when I wasn't even young when I made this, but I was in my 30s when we made Runaway Brain. But all that stuff was incredibly boring to me, and it was like, who wants that? So I wanted to make this little fun Mickey who loved playing video games in his house, and he loved Minnie and everything, but he was kind of like a scattered 20-something kid, and He didn't remember the anniversary of their first date. Why would he remember that? They're not married. So I sort of took all my sort of youthful angst, or not angst, but sort of aggression and attitudes, and I tried to infuse it onto that early Mickey. And so that's what we were kind of going for. One is a scary cartoon that really was a throwback to sort of the weirdness of the early Mickeys, and I wanted to make sure that Mickey was a young man, and his idea of getting dressed up is to put a clip-on tie. It's not to go get a Brooks Brothers suit. That's the old man Mickey that has the mortgage, and he goes to the opera for fun. Our Mickey sneaks into the theater and puts a clip-on tie to impress bosses. Well, I think they were very concerned because on one hand, Mickey's very popular and he's the face of the studio, and so they're very protective of Mickey. But they were very aware that he had gotten boring and that nobody really thought he was a very interesting character. That was sort of the dilemma they always had, and why they weren't doing more things with Mickey at the time, because they just couldn't come up with who he was, or what was the new face of Mickey. So there was one short that we actually took to Animatic before this, and we ended up shelving it. And it was based on a Roger Rabbit cartoon that I was developing, where Roger had an accident at the beginning of the cartoon trying to rescue Baby, and he was prescribed rest. And so Baby Herman, seeing an opportunity to take over as head of Maroon Cartoons, offers to take him home. And then the very first thing he does is wheels him out in his wheelchair from the hospital and push him down a hill into traffic. And that cartoon didn't go because there was something happened with Amblin and Disney. I can't remember what. But I said, well, wonder if I could do a cartoon with Mickey and Donald and set up their rivalry, that they're both stars, but Mickey gets the star treatment and Donald is always, treated like, a second-class citizen. Mickey's got the covered parking space. Donald has to park in the sun. Mickey's waved through the front lot, but Donald, even though he's a star, he still has to show his ID every day. Just all these little slights. And I thought, well, what if they went on vacation together and Donald just tried to kill Mickey at every turn? Like they go spearfishing and he tries to shoot him. But the idea would be every gag, kind of like not exactly a Roadrunner Coyote thing, but everything, of course, would backfire on Donald. Anyway, so we made this cartoon and we screened it, and I remember the evening I screened it for my immediate executives. They loved it. They thought it was great, and I was just riding high that I'm going to make this cool cartoon. And then we screened it the next day for Jeffrey Katzenberg, and it just died. It just was. He didn't think it was funny, and it just did nothing for him. And he didn't understand why Donald wasn't waved through the front gate. I think people at that level don't understand that. For example, when I was CAD animation supervisor on Hocus Pocus, I was driving on the lot every day. I had my Disney ID. Every day the guard would act like he'd never seen me before and make me show my ID. He knew I was on the movie, and so I thought these things were very funny because here I was, 30 years old and having to deal with these, and, Jeffrey just didn't understand it. I remember Roy Disney, he thought, well, we can fix it. Let's just fix it. And rather than fix it, because I always think that if an idea doesn't work, sometimes there's a way to go back and then tweak it and build it up, but it's almost better just to say, you know what, that idea didn't work. So I remember having a meeting with Roy, and I said, instead of fixing this, where I think it might just look like a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid, I'd like to pitch you this other cartoon that was part of my original pitch of, 5 or 6 of Jeffrey that we really liked. And that was Runaway Brain. And he thought that was great. So that's how we moved forward.
This Mickey, the face of the company, would be a monster so obviously the studio would have their thoughts.
And Jeffrey liked the aggression of it. He thought that was really great because he wanted to make sure that this cartoon didn't look like something that could have been dug out of the vault from 50 years ago. So he was very concerned that everything feel, modern and today. But he was, he'd left the studio post on the cartoon, and, the management that was left in place did think the cartoon was too aggressive, and there were some bits where the monster was, had this big toothy smile, was salivating and chasing after Minnie, and they thought it just went a little too far, along with the final in joke. So it did go through some pretty heavy, editorial at the very end, which I wish I would have known that early on, because I think it messed with the pacing a little bit. The cartoon's cut, it's a little sort of abrupt and a little fast in areas for me now. The darkness of the cartoon didn't bother them. I think what they were upset with or not happy with was that, which was funny because I worked very hard with Rusey on Minnie to be very businesslike and aggressive with Minnie. Like, I didn't want Minnie to be the damsel in distress, screaming for Mickey to save her. I wanted her to, like, she might scream, because that's who Minnie is, but she would turn around and hit the monster in the face. And we did that. And so I thought, the fact that she wasn't waiting to be rescued, but she was clearly in distress, was a really sort of progressive thing. Not that I was trying to be progressive, I just thought that's how it should be portrayed. The whole idea of the toothy monster and, going after her, they thought was just a little too aggressive in a sexual way, I guess, a little too salacious. But so that was the root of the issues. Because, for example, for the very end of the cartoon, if you remember, Mickey finally agrees to take her to Hawaii, and he can't afford it, so he dangles his wallet, which had the picture of Minnie that the monster liked, in front of him, was using it like the carrot in front of the horse to lead him to Hawaii. And it's fine, and it's cute. But the original gag, which was much funnier, was Mickey had made a little effigy of Minnie, drawing her face on a pillow, and he tied her shoes and gloves to the four corners of the pillow, and it just looked silly and stupid. And so it got a visual laugh out of it, as well as just intellectually getting it, that the monster thinks he's chasing after Minnie, still chasing after Minnie. The people that were in charge at the time, they just thought that said it was okay to use women as bait or something like that. It was just setting up a really bad, some kind of attitude for Mickey. I don't know. I don't think in those terms. So for me, it was like one was funny and one wasn't, and we had to go forward with the unfunny one. The monster, like when he appears in the bikini store, I think there was just a little more of that kind of thing. I think it was just a little. It wasn't that there was anything like a specific gag that's like, oh, they cut that gag. It was a great gag. The only one I felt that way with was the one I just described to you. It was really more just they wanted less of it. I think we actually ended up removing all the layers of saliva, so the monster didn't drool anymore. And I think we just cut out shock. Because I remember, at the very end, I was sort of reanimating hookups so that the cuts flowed a little better, even though we were chopping scenes in half or chopping scenes out. I really wanted to sort of run with the mandate of making a modern cartoon that no one would think was dug out of the vault. And, we had our video game opening, which is wonderfully boarded by Todd Kurosawa, of the Kung Fu game with Dopey and the Old Witch. And it's a great gag. Jeffrey originally wanted the gag to be even more modern, not just like a Nintendo game, but some of the virtual reality stuff was kind of coming into play, where you could point something at the screen and it would move something at the screen. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if we started from the exterior of Mickey's house, like similarly to we have now, but we hear gunshots and we see flashes of light in the windows, and you see Mickey's playing you hear Pluto barking, you see Mickey playing his video game, and Pluto's jumping around excited, and it's some kind of gun. And then on the screen, I'd have him say, "Run, Bambi, run!" and cut to the screen, and he'd be shooting Bambi as Bambi's running. And then as the gunfire hits the bushes, Flower would pop up, or Thumper, or ding, 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 with point. And look, I knew it didn't have a chance. I just wanted to push it as far as I could for the pitch. And I remember pitching Peter Schneider and and I think Tom Schumacher was there too. And Peter just looked at me and he just said, "Not a chance in hell." And I said, "Come on, let me pitch it to Roy." And so that's as far as that version got. And so ultimately we went back and we settled on the kung fu joke, which again, it's a great joke and it's a more appropriate joke. But I do love, somewhere there are storyboards of Mickey playing some kind of duck hunt, shoot 'em up Nintendo game with Bambi and Thumper in it.
The short film stops short of going all the way, but it does include an iconic shot from The Exorcist in a Disney film.
You know, for the animatic, you know, as with all films, you know, we use music from other films that we think, you know, help sell the moment. And we used 3 or 4 seconds of Tubular Bells there from The Exorcist, and it totally sold the gag, and it got a huge laugh. Well, I remember, and Jeffrey was super supportive, like, look, we have to get the rights for that. It's totally worth it. But unfortunately, it was too expensive, so it wasn't totally worth it. And Disney didn't buy the rights, so we had to kind of do our, you know, do a score that implied Tubular Bells but wasn't Tubular Bells, and so you get the moment, but again, it wasn't as quite as laugh out loud funny as when you actually heard Tubular Bells for that Exorcist moment. I know, I probably, you know, I don't know, I can't remember. I think when it was Tubular Bells, I think because you got the association so quickly that I think the shot didn't need more time. But yeah, in retrospect, I think probably, you know, another second or something, or a second and a half wouldn't have heard it.
It also includes some more subversive comedy than we are used to, with a couple of Easter eggs, including one referencing J.K., Jeffrey Katzenberg's exit from the studio.
When the trap door opens and there's the big vacuum cleaner that's sucking in trash from the street, and I'm pretty sure if you freeze frame it, you can see that Zazu from The Lion King is sucked down past Mickey. And there's also a pink piece of paper that has the initials JK on it. Yeah, with the Sphinx. It was the JK pink slip. So here we had this cartoon, and we had the animatic, and they, you know, Disney at the time, they had purchased the Paris studio. They were just sort of intent on taking over the world, and it was a way to take advantage of European animation talent that wouldn't or couldn't, you know, move to the United States. And so an opportunity came up in between, I guess it was in between Pocahontas and Hunchback. You know, they had a break. So they said, oh my God, this is the perfect opportunity. Let's do Runaway Brain there. So I was asked to move to Paris for 9 months to make the cartoon. And, you know, that was a terrific experience. You know, the animators did a phenomenal job. And, you know, and one of the stars, actually, this will come as no surprise to anybody, was Sergio Pablos. He and I like struck a rapport pretty early. He totally got, you know, the Mickey I was going for. He animated, you know, my favorite shots. You know, apologies to Andreas, who's brilliant, but I think Sergio, my sensibility was just, you know, right in the same lane. But you know, I think the biggest, you know, anecdote I think was that you know, just we were going along in a certain path, you know, making the cartoon, and then at a certain point Jeffrey left the studio, and it's like, hey, we're gonna change direction on the cartoon. And that was the biggest obstacle we had to deal with. They liked the cartoon. They just thought it, you know, because now they were in charge, they wanted it to reflect more of their sensibilities for where it was going. Again, I don't fault that. I just, you know, I kind of wish it had happened sooner, because then I love, if you look at my career of projects I've worked on, I totally love Sweet and Charming. I can go more sweet and charming. I can go more aggressive and dark. I love all this stuff. You know, I can get excited about pretty much anything. And some people say Disney hated it. It's the cartoon they want to bury. Yes and no. I mean, it did pop up on a Mickey's Greatest Hits Laserdisc, I remember, in Japan. One day walking into the commissary at Disney, the special was the Runaway Brain. You know, they called it the Runaway Brain. I have no idea what it was in retrospect, but I just remember seeing that somebody wrote it on the chalkboard, and I thought that was very funny. And, you know, if you look around Disneyland, they would market Runaway Brain stuff. There, you'd see like a T-shirt with Mickey's Greatest Villains, and they'd have the little monster Mickey on there, or, you know, in a snow globe or something. So you know, they were aware that the cartoon had fans, and they did support it to a pretty decent extent in that regard. But what was interesting, so the cartoon came out, and they put it out with, I believe at first, they advertised it with A Kid in King Arthur's Court, but they also put it out with other cartoons on other live action films unadvertised. And I remember like mail was coming in, you know, and the studio was always good about forwarding, you know, mail addressed to, you know, directors or animators to them. And I would either get an email saying, "We hate this cartoon. It scared my little kid. I hope Disney makes no more cartoons like this ever." Or they would say, "Oh my God, this is like the coolest Mickey cartoon I've ever seen in my life. You know, how did you get this thing done? Blah, blah, blah." And I always sent anyone who wrote the studio like a little drawing, even if, you know, the people who hated it. I would say, "I'm sorry you didn't like this, you know, but please encourage the studio to make more cartoons, because I guarantee for everyone you don't like, there will be 3 or 4 that you love." And then I say, here's a nice Mickey as a consolation. And then if someone really loved the aggression of it, I'd send them a monster Mickey drawing. At Disneyland, one of the animators was actually told that they had to change their crew T-shirt, because it had the monster Mickey on it. And they said, you can't come into the park wearing that, a Mickey that looks like that. And he said, "Well, no, this is an official studio shirt. We're making this cartoon, and this is what he looks like in the cartoon." And they actually called the studio to verify it, and then they let him in the park wearing the T-shirt. And it was weeks later. I remember my producer, she'd gone to the park, and she got in a conversation with one of the ride operators, and about working at the studio. She says, "Oh, what did you what do you produce?" He says, "Oh, I work in feature animation. I produced this Mickey Mouse cartoon." That brain thing? And then she's like, "Yeah." He says, "We heard about that." And so this whole story of some animator being turned away at the front gate because he was wearing a Runaway Brain T-shirt sort of became mythic, which I thought was hilarious.